Hello and welcome to Workers Comp Unwrapped, the podcast that simplifies workers' compensation for physicians. I'm your host, Max, here to give you clear, actionable insights to navigate the medical legal side of workers' comp. So let's get started. Welcome back to Season 2, Episode 4 of Workers Comp Unwrapped. With me today is Aisha.
Hi.
Who brings 15 years of experience in the workers' comp industry.
Yeah, that's right.
And we're talking about why it's so important to strengthen working relationships between insurance and collections teams, especially for medical practices like yours.
Absolutely. This relationship can really significantly impact how smoothly your claims are processed and how quickly you get paid.
Okay, so let's start by kind of painting a picture of the current landscape.
Yeah.
You're deeply familiar with California's workers' comp system. But for our listeners, can you just give us a quick overview of its complexity and how that kind of sets the stage for this unique dynamic between insurance and collections?
Yeah, so California's workers' comp system is known for its intricate regulations and procedures, and this complexity often creates tension between insurance representatives who are trying to protect the insurer's interests and collections representatives who are advocating for the provider's financial well-being. It's kind of like a delicate dance where both sides need to understand each other's steps to avoid stepping on each other's toes.
So let's break down these dancers a bit further.
Okay.
Who are these key players and what are their primary goals?
So on one side, we have the insurance representatives, and they're employed by the insurance companies, and they're responsible for managing the claims that come in from providers like you.
Okay.
They verify eligibility, ensure compliance with all the regulations, scrutinize every piece of documentation, and ultimately decide whether to approve or deny a claim. Their main goal is to protect the insurer's assets and ensure efficient claim processing.
And on the other side, we have the collections representatives, the unsung heroes of the provider's billing team.
Exactly. These are the folks who tirelessly work to recover payments from the insurers. They're experts in navigating the billing maze, addressing any disputes that pop up, and ultimately ensuring the practice receives the revenue that's rightfully owed. Their goal is to maximize revenue and minimize those dreaded outstanding accounts.
Sounds like they both have pretty demanding jobs. But if their objectives are so different, is it even realistic to expect them to work well together? Isn't there always going to be that underlying tension?
There's definitely a potential for conflict, and I've seen it play out in countless scenarios throughout my career. But what's fascinating is that this tension, while inherent, isn't insurmountable. In fact, recognizing and understanding the root causes of this conflict can actually be the first step towards building a more collaborative and productive relationship.
I'm intrigued. Let's dive into these root causes. What are some of the key challenges that hinder collaboration between these two crucial teams?
Well, one major challenge is miscommunication.
Okay.
It's like speaking different languages sometimes. Insurance reps might send vague denial reasons, while collections reps might not follow up with all the necessary information. And this leads to confusion, frustration, and significant delays in the process.
It sounds like a recipe for communication breakdown.
Yeah.
And I can imagine that this lack of clarity fuels mistrust between the two sides.
You're absolutely right. Mistrust is another major hurdle. Insurance reps might perceive collections reps as overly aggressive, while collections reps might see insurance reps as deliberately obstructive.
Right.
And this creates this negative feedback loop that erodes trust and hinders any chance of genuine collaboration.
So it's like they're constantly on guard, waiting for the other shoe to drop.
But beyond communication and trust issues, are there any other factors that kind of contribute to this strained relationship?
Absolutely. Inconsistent documentation is a huge culprit. Imagine you're submitting a claim for a complex procedure and you forget a crucial modifier. That seemingly small oversight can trigger an automatic denial, leading to a cascade of back-and-forth communication and unnecessary delays.
Well, that makes perfect sense. A missing modifier is like a missing puzzle piece. It throws off the whole picture. Are there any other missing pieces that commonly trip up providers? Oh, definitely. California's workers' compensation regulations, while designed to protect both employees and employers, are notoriously complex and nuanced. And even seasoned professionals can sometimes disagree about the necessity of certain services, or the correct coding to use, or whether all the timelines have been met. This ambiguity can easily lead to disputes and stalled claims.
So we've got communication breakdowns, we've got mistrust, we've got inconsistent documentation, and then we've got the ever-present complexity of California's regulations. It paints a pretty challenging picture, but I'm curious from your experience, is there a particular challenge that you see cropping up more frequently than others?
One thing that really stands out to me is the sheer volume of work that both sides are dealing with. Insurance representatives and collections teams are often juggling hundreds of claims at a time. And this constant pressure can lead to rushed decisions, overlooked details, and a general lack of time for proactive and thoughtful communication. It's like trying to build a strong relationship while running a marathon.
So in essence, even with the best intentions, the system itself kind of creates an environment where conflict is almost inevitable.
That's a great way to put it. But here's the thing, even though these challenges are very real, they don't have to define the relationship between insurance and collections.
Okay.
It is possible to shift this dynamic from one of friction to one of collaboration, and the benefits are truly remarkable.
Okay, now you've got me really curious. You're saying that even in this complex and often adversarial system, there's hope for building strong, mutually beneficial relationships.
Absolutely. And the benefits extend far beyond just smoother interactions. We're talking about faster claim resolutions, increased payment accuracy, reduced administrative burdens, and ultimately a more financially stable practice for you. It's a win-win for everyone involved.
This is all starting to sound very promising. But before we get too carried away with the sunshine and rainbows, let's get real. What does a successful relationship actually look like in this context? And more importantly, how do we get there?
Those are great questions. And that's what we'll unpack in the next part of our discussion. So you're dealing with these complex claims, and you want to improve your relationships with insurance reps to get paid faster.
Exactly. It feels like there's this invisible wall sometimes, and we're all just throwing things over it, hoping for the best.
Yeah, I understand that feeling, but imagine if instead of a wall, there was a bridge. A bridge built on clear communication, mutual understanding, and maybe even a little bit of trust. That's what we're aiming for.
Okay, I'm on board with the bridge analogy.
Yeah.
But how do we actually start building it? What are the tools and strategies that can help providers like our listeners bridge that gap and create a more collaborative dynamic with insurance teams?
Well, the first pillar of this bridge has to be clear communication. And I'm not just talking about sending emails back and forth. It's about establishing dedicated channels and protocols that really streamline the flow of information and minimize the potential for misunderstandings.
So what does that look like in practice?
Start by designating specific points of contact on both sides. So your collections team should know exactly who to reach out to at the insurance company, and the insurance rep should have a go-to person on your billing team.
That makes sense. Having that direct line of communication can really cut through a lot of the red tape and prevent those frustrating games of phone tag.
Exactly. And think about leveraging technology to your advantage. Secure portals or collaborative platforms where you can share claim updates, documentation messages in real time can be game changers.
That's interesting. So instead of relying on faxes or emails that can get lost in the black hole of cyberspace, there's a centralized system where everyone has access to the most up-to-date information.
Precisely. It brings transparency and accountability to the process.
I see.
And to further strengthen those lines of communication, consider scheduling regular check-in calls with your key insurance representatives.
Okay, so I'm picturing like a friendly, proactive call, maybe every couple of weeks, where we can just touch base on any pending issues or clarify any questions before they escalate into major problems.
You got it. It's about building rapport, fostering a sense of partnership, and addressing those potential roadblocks early on.
This proactive approach to communication sounds promising. But let's be realistic for a moment. We're all incredibly busy. How can we squeeze in these extra calls and meetings when we're already juggling a million things?
That's a valid concern, but think of it as an investment. The time you spend building these relationships up front can save you countless hours of frustration and headaches down the road. And remember, these calls don't have to be lengthy or overly formal. Even a quick 15-minute check-in can make a world of difference.
Okay, I'm starting to see the value in kind of shifting our mindset from reactive to proactive. But clear communication is just one piece of the puzzle, right? What other strategies can we use to kind of build that bridge of collaboration?
This might sound a bit unconventional, but I'm a big advocate for cross-training.
Cross-training? You mean like having insurance reps learn about the collections process and vice versa?
Exactly. It's about stepping into each other's shoes and gaining a deeper understanding of the challenges and perspectives of the other side.
That's a fascinating idea. How would this cross-training actually work? What kind of information would be shared?
Well, for your collections team, it would be incredibly valuable to learn about the inner workings of the insurance world. What are the specific triggers that lead to denials? What documentation is absolutely essential to include in a claim submission? What are the insurer's internal workflows and timelines?
So it's about giving our collections team kind of the inside scoop, The knowledge that can help them avoid those common pitfalls and submit cleaner claims from the get-go.
You got it. And for the insurance representatives, the training could focus on understanding the provider's perspective. What are the financial pressures facing medical practices? What is the impact of delayed payments on their ability to provide quality care? How do denials affect their bottom line?
Right. It's about humanizing the process, reminding everyone that there are real people and real businesses impacted by these decisions.
Absolutely. And when you have that shared understanding, it becomes so much easier to find common ground and work collaboratively towards solutions.
This cross-training idea is intriguing, but realistically, how feasible is it to get busy insurance representatives on board with this? I mean, they're already swamped with their own workload.
I agree. It's not always easy, but the key is to frame it as a mutually beneficial opportunity. Emphasize that this training will ultimately make their jobs easier as well. By equipping providers with the knowledge and tools to submit cleaner claims, they'll be dealing with fewer disputes, fewer appeals, and a more efficient workflow overall. It's about selling the win-win.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's about positioning it as a strategic investment, not just an additional burden. Okay, so we've got clear communication, we've got cross-training. What other tools can we add to our collaboration toolkit?
Let's talk about the power of standardized processes. Think of it as creating a shared playbook for how claims are handled, especially when those inevitable disputes arise.
So instead of everyone operating on their own assumptions and interpretations, there's a clear agreed-upon process for how different situations will be handled.
Exactly. This could involve developing templates for common requests, like asking for additional documentation or submitting an appeal. It could also include establishing clear workflows for managing disputes with specific timelines and escalation protocols for those particularly tricky cases.
It's about removing the guesswork and creating a more predictable and efficient system for everyone involved. But let's be honest, standardized processes can sometimes feel a bit rigid and bureaucratic. How do we ensure that these processes are flexible enough to adapt to the nuances of individual cases without getting bogged down in red tape?
That's a great point. The key is to strike a balance. You want to have enough structure to provide clarity and consistency, but you also need to allow for some flexibility to accommodate those unique situations that inevitably arise. Regularly review and update your processes based on feedback from both sides. And remember, the goal is to streamline communication and resolution, not to create a bureaucratic monster.
This focus on standardized processes is making me think about the role of technology. It seems like there's a huge opportunity to leverage tech to really streamline these interactions and make everyone's lives a little bit easier.
You're absolutely right. We're living in a digital age, and there are some incredible tools that can transform the way insurance and collections teams collaborate.
Okay, I'm all ears. Give us the tech lowdown. What are some of the game changers we should be embracing?
First and foremost, claims management software is essential. These platforms allow both providers and insurers to track claims in real time, see where they are in the pipeline, and receive automatic notifications about any pending actions.
So instead of playing phone tag or sending endless emails, we have this centralized hub where everyone can see the status of the claim at a glance.
Exactly. It eliminates so much of the back and forth and prevents things from slipping through the cracks. And speaking of preventing things from slipping through the cracks, let's talk about the power of analytics.
Analytics. How does that fit into this picture?
Imagine being able to analyze your data to identify patterns and denials. Maybe there's a particular procedure code that's consistently getting flagged, or a specific documentation requirement that's tripping you up. By using analytics, you can spot these trends and address the root cause, rather than just reacting to individual denials as they pop up.
Right, so it's about being proactive and using data to make smarter decisions, both in terms of how we submit claims and how we address those inevitable denials.
Exactly. And speaking of working smarter, not harder, let's not forget the power of automation. Automating tasks like sending reminders, follow-up messages, and even some aspects of the claim submission process can drastically reduce manual errors and free up your team's time to focus on more strategic tasks.
So it's not just about using technology to streamline communication, but also to reduce the administrative burden and improve efficiency overall.
Precisely. It's about using these tools strategically to create a smoother, more efficient, and ultimately more collaborative experience for everyone involved. But even with all the technology in the world, we can't forget about the human element at the heart of this relationship.
You're right. Building trust and fostering mutual respect is crucial. But how do we cultivate that in a system that often feels inherently adversarial?
It starts with a shift in mindset. Instead of approaching disputes as battles to be won, think of them as problems to be solved collaboratively.
So it's about coming to the table with a spirit of partnership, not antagonism.
Exactly. Focus on finding solutions that work for both sides, not just trying to win the argument.
That makes sense. It's about finding common ground and recognizing that we're all ultimately working towards the same goal, getting the claim resolved fairly and efficiently so that the injured worker can get the care they need. But in your experience, are there any specific communication strategies that can help foster this sense of collaboration and trust?
Absolutely. Active listening is crucial. When an insurance representative is explaining their perspective, really listen to what they're saying. Ask clarifying questions to make sure you understand their concerns, and try to empathize with their position even if you don't necessarily agree with it.
So it's about acknowledging their expertise and treating them as valuable partners in the process, not just roadblocks to overcome.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of simple gestures of appreciation. A sincere thank you for a timely response or a helpful explanation can go a long way in building goodwill and strengthening the relationship.
Yeah, it's about humanizing the interaction and reminding everyone that we're all in this together. But what about those situations where, despite our best efforts, conflicts escalate and we just can't seem to find common ground?
Those situations definitely happen, and that's when mediation can be an incredibly valuable tool.
Mediation. Tell me more about that.
Mediation involves bringing in a neutral third party, someone like a legal expert, a medical lead and management firm, or a compliance specialist, to help facilitate a resolution.
So it's like having a referee who can help both sides see the bigger picture and find a compromise that works for everyone.
Exactly. Mediation can be especially helpful when emotions are running high or when there's a fundamental disagreement about the interpretation of regulations or coding guidelines.
Okay, so we've got this toolkit full of strategies. We've got clear communication, cross-training, standardized processes, technology, and even mediation as a last resort. But all of this sounds great in theory. Do you have any real-world examples of how these strategies have actually played out and made a difference for providers like our listeners?
Absolutely. I've witnessed firsthand how moving from a place of friction to one of collaboration can transform the entire claims process. And I have a case study that perfectly illustrates this. Let's dive into that right after. Well, we don't have breaks, so let's just jump right in.
All right, Aisha, you mentioned a case study. Lay it on us. What kind of transformation are we talking about here?
I once worked with an orthopedic practice that was facing a situation all too familiar to many providers. They were struggling with delayed payments, especially for those more complex, high-value claims. It was a constant battle of documentation requests, denials, and appeals. And their collections team was incredibly frustrated, and tensions with the insurance company were running high.
Yeah, it sounds like they were caught in that all-too-common cycle of reactivity and frustration. I can only imagine the toll it takes on a practice.
It was definitely taking a toll. They were spending, an inordinate amount of time and energy chasing down payments, which was impacting their ability to focus on patient care. But instead of just accepting this as their reality, they decided to try something different. They reached out to the lead insurance representative at the company and requested a face-to-face meeting.
Okay, so they took that first step towards open communication. But I'm curious, what was the tone of that initial meeting? Was it confrontational or more collaborative?
They went into it with a very clear intention to understand the insurer's perspective and find a way to work together more effectively. It wasn't about placing blame or pointing fingers. It was about acknowledging the challenges both sides were facing and finding a path towards a more mutually beneficial relationship.
That's a great approach. But were they able to actually get the insurance representative on board with this collaborative spirit?
The insurance representative was initially a bit guarded, as you might expect, but once she realized that the practice was genuinely committed to finding solutions, her demeanor shifted. She was open to hearing their concerns and willing to share her perspective as well.
Oh, that's great. That open dialogue must have been incredibly valuable. What were some of the key insights that emerged from that conversation?
They quickly realized that a lot of the back and forth stemmed from a lack of clarity around documentation expectations. The insurer had very specific requirements, but those weren't always clear to the provider. And the provider wasn't always sure what level of detail the insurer needed to approve the claim.
So it was a classic communication breakdown, leading to unnecessary delays and frustration on both sides.
Exactly. But once they identified the root cause, they could start working together to find a solution. And they decided to create a shared workflow for those high scrutiny claims, including a detailed checklist of all the documentation required by the insurer.
So instead of guessing what the insurer wanted, they had a clear roadmap for success. That sounds like a brilliant solution.
It was. And they didn't stop there. They also established clear timelines for responses. So the insurer committed to reviewing and responding to documentation requests within a specific time frame, and the provider agreed to submit complete and accurate information from the get-go.
No more radio silence or endless waiting games. Everyone knew what was expected of them, and when I can see how that would significantly reduce anxiety and improve efficiency on both sides.
It did, and the results spoke for themselves. They saw a 30% decrease in the average time it took to resolve those complex claims.
Wow, a 30% improvement. That's remarkable. But was it just about speed, or were there other positive outcomes as well?
The benefits went far beyond just speed. They also saw a significant reduction in denials and disputes. By working together proactively, they were able to iron out those wrinkles in the process and prevent those issues from arising in the first place.
So they transformed a contentious relationship into a collaborative partnership, and everyone benefited. The provider was getting paid faster, the insurer was minimizing unnecessary costs and delays, and most importantly, the injured workers were receiving timely access to the care they needed.
Exactly. It's a perfect example of how shifting the dynamic from us versus them to we're in this together can lead to transformative outcomes.
And this isn't just a heartwarming anecdote. There are concrete metrics that you can track to measure the success of these collaborative efforts.
Okay, let's talk data. What are some key metrics that our listeners should be monitoring to assess the effectiveness of their collaboration strategies?
One of the most important metrics is average claim resolution time. How long does it typically take for a claim to move from submission to payment? If you see that time frame shrinking, it's a good sign that your efforts are paying off. So track those timelines and look for a downward trend. Makes sense. What else should we be keeping an eye on?
Your denial rate is another crucial indicator. Are you seeing a decrease in the percentage of claims that are initially denied? And when denials do happen, how successful are you in challenging them and securing payment?
So it's not just about the volume of denials, but also our effectiveness in addressing them.
Exactly. And don't forget about responsiveness. How quickly are insurance representatives responding to your inquiries? Are they meeting those agreed upon timelines? Tracking response times can provide valuable insights into the overall health of the communication flow.
It's like taking the pulse of the relationship. Okay, so we've got resolution time, denial rates, and responsiveness. Any other key metrics we should be factoring into our assessment?
Absolutely. Keep a close eye on your collections recovery rate. This is the ultimate measure of your financial success. What percentage of the total billed amounts are you actually collecting? By monitoring this metric, you can see the direct impact of your collaborative efforts on your bottom line.
This has been an incredible deep dive into a topic that's often overlooked, but so crucial to the success of medical practices in the workers' compensation system. Aisha, your insights and real-world examples have been incredibly valuable.
It's been my pleasure. This topic is so close to my heart because I've seen firsthand the difference that strong collaborative relationships can make. It's not just about smoother transactions, it's about creating a system that works better for everyone involved, especially the injured workers who rely on us for timely access to care.
And for our listeners, I hope this conversation has sparked some ideas and inspired you to take a closer look at your own relationships with insurance teams. Remember, even in a complex system like California's workers' compensation, building bridges of collaboration is not only possible, but essential for your practice's financial health and your patients' well-being.
And remember, you don't have to tackle this alone. There are resources available to help you navigate this complex landscape, from industry associations to legal experts to experienced consultants.
Thank you for joining us, Aisha.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to Workers Comp Unwrapped. We'll see you next time for another deep dive into the world of California workers' compensation.
Thank you for listening to Workers' Comp Unwrapped. If you found value in today's episode, share it with your fellow medical providers and healthcare specialists. For more information, contact us at lena.klein@medicallienmgt.com or visit our website, medicallienmgt.com.